Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting episode of the Vinny Eastwood Show, broadcasting on a podcast, I guess. And my very special guest is Michael of Benicia. Michael, welcome to the program.
Hey, Vinny. Great to be here.
Could you elucidate as to what exactly Benicia means? Is it anything like Elysium?
Nothing at all, in fact. It is the name of what is currently known as Northumberland or Northumbria in northeastern Britain.
Oh, right.
And it used to stretch all the way up to about where Edinburgh is now in Scotland, all the way down to around about where York is now.
Ah.
So that's the name I take.
Okie dokie. Well, without further ado, let's get you to explain a little bit about who you are and what it is you do.
Okay, well, I suppose the best place to start is 2008. In 2008, I got to the point where I could no longer continue to acquiesce to any part of what I saw as a tyrannical state. So in September 2008, after doing an awful lot of legal research, I ended up serving a notice of understanding and intent and claim of right upon the woman acting as the Queen of England, revoking my consent to be governed and letting her know how I was going to conduct myself from there on in. Around about 6 months later, I amended that document and it became a sovereign declaration in which I proclaimed that it was my sole mission upon this planet to found a community in which we would lay down the foundations of a society where our children would find it easier to self-realize, and we'd find it easier to self-realize ourselves. And it was called the Universal Community of Self-Realization, the nation that I founded not long after that.
So I continue.
I declared that in March 2009 that was my intention. I received absolutely no objection from any government department or from the Queen. I also received no acknowledgement. And so I proceeded as I'd given her notice and declared that I would. And others came forward who took the same position as I, and we joined forces. And basically what we created was a community of sovereign nations, which is known as Universal Community Trust. And this community of sovereign nations has established by memorandum of understanding following six months after we had entered into a treaty, which is called the Treaty of Universal Community Trust, and we served that treaty upon the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and we awaited their response. We received no response, and 6 months after that, we served a memorandum of understanding upon Elizabeth and the Foreign Office, in which we stated the terms of the mutual understanding that had arisen. And that basically comprises of Her Majesty's government not raising any legal objection to 12 aims and objectives that we laid down in the treaty. And I could go on and perhaps on and on, letting you know.
Actually, I'd invite you to, because I would like to hear more.
Okay, so basically these 12 aims and objectives, they set forth everything that Universal Community Trust and everyone who stands under Universal Community Trust, it sets forth everything that we are aiming to bring about. And I think probably the best way to continue is for me to actually read them to you. It won't take long if you want to go through them.
Oh, she's right. She's right. Go for your life.
The first one is an end to all crimes against mankind and the earth that are currently being perpetrated by governments, whether elected or not, corporations, organisations, individuals and legal entities of all natures and descriptions. 2, the dismantling of all industries which by developing, manufacturing and exploiting for profit any substance, product or byproduct cause actual damage, harm, injury or loss to mankind and or damage to the earth. 3, the deconstruction of unsustainable fiscal systems that would facilitate one man to have and one man to have not, including, without limitation, the abolition of usury in all of its forms and the demonopolization of land rights, international borders, mediums of exchange, trading platforms, and the means of communicating, publishing and distributing information. 4. The nullifying, settlement and or discharge of all outstanding or allegedly owed debts, obligations and liabilities with a view to replacing unaccountable, unsustainable and inequitable usury-based financial systems with localized and autonomous permanent credit facilities or depositories in every community that stands under the jurisdiction of Universal Community Trust. 5. The eradication of all forms of artificial scarcity and its effects, including homelessness, famine and disease, by and through the facilitation of a naturally abundant, peaceful, free and harmonious environment for mankind to dwell, and the distribution of organic materials, agricultural produce, seeds and proven natural health remedies. 6. The dissolution of mankind's dependence upon fossil fuel industries for the production of energy, including, without limitation, coal seam gas mining, coal-fired power stations and oil drilling, as well as the cessation of all toxic pollution of the biosphere of the earth in any detrimental form whatsoever, whether it be gaseous, liquid, solid or radioactive, and the closure and clean-up of all unsafe nuclear power facilities. 7. The rapid development, manufacture, distribution and implementation of new and existing free and clean energy technologies in every community upon the earth under Universal Community Trust. 8. A ceasefire in all wars, the repatriation of all armed services personnel following the repudiation of all unlawful allegiances and the setting aside of all oaths made in the service of private interests to the detriment of mankind, and the unequivocal commitment of the parties to this treaty to recall and withdraw any and all beneficiaries of Universal Community Trust from every armed conflict at the earliest opportunity. 9. The establishment of cooperative trade networks in and between all communities with a view to promoting the localization of trade, self-sufficiency, mutual cooperation, and the eventual replacement of money with unconditional pledges of sweat equity, which shall form the basis for the permanent credit of every beneficiary of Universal Community Trust. 10. An agreement that privately issued promissory notes made payable to bearer on demand by any grantor, trustee or beneficiary of Universal Community Trust may be used for the purposes of settling any valid financial obligations or to create credits in their account held at the community's depository, the balance of which will be transferable to any account in another jurisdiction, provided those credits are not used for any purpose that is detrimental to mankind and or the earth. 11. The nullifying of any and all judicial proceedings and convictions for victimless crimes, as well as the positive law which legalized such unlawful proceedings, and the prohibition and prevention of any man being charged with future crimes. 12. The facilitation of the re-emergence of the universal bond of common unity between the free indigenous peoples of the earth in order to achieve these aims and objectives in the most peaceful, amicable and equitable manners.
It sounds very similar to a piece of legislation I myself have concocted called the Suppression of Scumbaggery Act.
Yes, I believe that could be a very good subtitle for it.
Yeah. And I think that what you've got here is basically like, it's about making all of the lies of our society true again, okay? Because, you know, we've got governments to allegedly protect us, but they don't. So that lie needs to be made true so that they actually do protect us and do their job. Politicians, they promise things and they tax you for it, and it's just a big lie. And I've concluded that the only thing that actually needs to make society work again is all of these systems that are big lies, just turn them into truth, and I think it'll actually work quite well.
Me too. And there's a lot of other people that think exactly the same. And another way to express it, is we have to reverse all the ill effects of globalization and monopolization. And without expressing what it is that's actually wrong, no one can understand what the solutions actually are. But to express it as you have so eloquently, we're basically putting the truth back into communities. We're putting the truth back into our own existence, but we're also holding the truth up for all of the programmed masses to see, because we can only do this together. We can't. There's no way that one tiny community can live like this, like we've proposed, in the world the way it is now. There's no way it would be possible.
Yeah, because there's two types of people in the world. Those that want to be left alone and those who won't leave you alone.
That's right. And even though the ones that won't leave us alone are a tiny minority, the vast majority of the people on the planet are still brainwashed into thinking that there is something called authority which will come down on them like a ton of bricks if they don't obey every single diktat of a tyrant.
And in most cases, they'd actually be correct, wouldn't they?
Yes, in most cases, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that's how you know that you're really not free, that you're actually a slave. I mean, you're free to watch X Factor, Big Brother, and Coronation Street, but you're not free to protest fracking.
That's right. That's right. They are attempting within the European Union, such as it is, to make pretty much anything that we'd want to do that would subvert the authoritarian line illegal. Now, I have to also say that while what you said before is completely true, that most of the time when you stand up to the state, you have a major problem to deal with. And sometimes they won't back down. And good, decent, honest people are being thrown out their homes by pirates and mercenaries every single day for alleged debts to banks, which any researcher who's taken more than 2 hours to look on the internet can determine for themselves that the banks do not lend any money, and they haven't for a very long time. They create credits and then charge compound interest on this electronic money that they create.
Kind of like Star Trek. And here's another point that I think actually really bears looking upon as well. If you have a look, and we're talking about a system here, okay, and everybody talks about the system. And I wanted to understand from your perspective, what is the system? Could you define it?
Yes, but the system is not the same as it was prior to 1815. So I can describe it as it has become since 1815. In the most simplistic terms, it is a globalized system of corporatist policy being imposed upon all the indigenous peoples of the planet in order to convince them that they have absolutely no choice but to live a certain way and be dependent upon the state for certain things and to rely on the state for as many things as possible in order that they become so compliant with the system because it provides them with everything that they think they need, that the very thought of giving up what the benefits and privileges of the system, it brings them out in hives. You know, they wake up in a cold sweat at the thought of not paying tax, of saying to the tax man, well, I'm sorry, can you provide me proof that I have to pay you a penny from my income? And this is another topic that you may want to discuss because I actually managed to establish with HM Revenue and Customs that I am not a taxpayer and cannot be considered a taxpayer, and I haven't received an income tax return or a demand or a letter from Her Majesty's revenue collectors since they accepted that they could not prove that I was any form of taxpayer. However, when I tell people that I haven't paid tax in a number of years, that I don't return the tax returns, that I don't comply with any orders of the system, that I don't feel morally obliged to comply with, they laugh at me, usually, and they get very nervous because they imagine what it would be like if they did that. And the system has created almost an automatic default